Q-commerce is now becoming really a core component of retail infrastructure. The adoption of big box retailers like Morrison's, Tesco, more recently Asda now, launching delivery to 850 stores is real testament to that. There's a lot of emerging challenger brands in like the energy category, but the energy category is dominated by Red Bull, it's dominated by Monster Energy, it's dominated by Nubalsate over here in the UK. So to enter into that, you've got to have something very compelling. I think that the maturity curve, as you say, is look from a core brand categories as well. You see a real focus on soft drinks, alcohol, confectionery, certain grocery items, biscuits, coffee, tea, milk, bread, eggs, etc. I think we're firmly in the second phase now of Q-commerce.
This is the Digital Shelf Insider podcast of Metriscart. The quick commerce market in the UK has changed drastically. Industry estimates value the UK market at $3.02 billion with expectations to reach $4.22 billion by 2031. It's no longer just a race to see who can expand the fastest. Now, it's about making the economics work, connecting with local stores, and proving real business value. My guest today is Greg Deacon. He's the VP of Media Ads, Key Accounts, and Business Development at Snappy Shopper. Greg has helped change how we think about rapid delivery, turning into a real engine for customer growth and retail media. In fact, his team has managed to scale retail media to 8% of the total revenue. So let's get to have a conversation with Greg. I must say that we are not covered quick commerce to a great extent in the podcast. It was mostly across India, and today we have a perspective from the UK. Let's listen in. Hi all, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Greg Deacon joining us, and we're going to be talking a lot about what's happening in the quick commerce space and retail media in the UK. Greg, warm welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah. First, let's just begin a little bit with a macro perspective of how is the quick commerce landscape in the US. My understanding is that it has moved from a race for geographical expansion to something more of an operational efficiency and ecosystem monetization. So, and it's getting more integrated into supermarkets and convenience stores individually. So, how do you view the whole ecosystem evolving?
I think you've done the job for me there. Good summary for the UK. I think we're firmly in the second phase now of Q-commerce. What we're seeing, 5 years ago there was, a real focus on coverage. You had dark stores, you had customer acquisition. Of course, customer acquisition hasn't stopped, but where we see today, Q-commerce is now becoming really a core component of retail infrastructure. The adoption of big box retailers like Morrison's, Tesco, more recently Asda now, launching delivery to 850 stores is real testament to that. And then when you look at more local independent retail or regional retail, that's where you see the likes of Snappy Shopper coming to their own, where really now it's the digital storefront that's becoming a real key component of local convenience, how customers choose to shop, when they shop, how they shop. And I think that's creating a real interesting opportunity for brands and retailers alike. But clearly, those that will continue to adopt the technology, integrate it into their ecosystem, I think will be the ones that will win. So we see that through those that have stronger ranges, real-time availability, product promotions, and equally at the same time ensuring that they have a really good level of service and in-store operational protocols, which means that when you place an order, you typically can get it within circa 30 minutes. Even though I don't believe the customer really needs it any quicker than that, quite frankly. But I think the model is now moving to that next phase, and that next phase is integration, continue building out of the aggregators, white label that you touched on, and I think customer demand will come with that. I think that's where we're now heading into.
Yeah.
It's really an exciting opportunity for everybody.
Definitely. I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the retail media space as well. So I talked to a lot of experts in the US, and the major challenge everybody says is there's no standardization and measurement. How is it in the UK? Like, is it something like brands see it as nice to have, or how do you structurally embed it into the core commercial model?
Yeah, I truly, it's a really interesting one. The word standardization. It's very difficult to standardize something where the expectations differ by brand. Um, but we can get to an element of uniformity around perhaps the metrics that support the objectives, perhaps for a brand. Um, it's still in its early stages. I think there's the evolution of firstly, more and more brands are turning to quick commerce, retail media as a form of driving digital shelf share, digital shelf performance, and digital shelf visibility to consumer. And I think there's perhaps a recognition of we're going to see this as a performance channel. Actually, this can be an awareness channel. And I've been one of those more recently that's been calling it, is aggregator quick commerce. So when I talk about the likes of Just Eat, Deliveroo, Uber Eats, and to some degree Snappy Shopper, is that actually a form of out of home marketing, digital for out of home? You know, vast audiences on these channels that can put brands really in the moment of discovery as well as purchase. That moment of intent is so high, but they're not actually in the store. They're at the comfort of their home. They could be on the move, of course. They could be at the workplace. But I do feel like the movement of standardization around data is coming slowly. I think the IAB and people like that are really pushing that agenda. But I think it's difficult because of how each platform operates and what's been built, equally the demands and expectations of the brand partners as well. I think we're quite a way off from that just yet. But in the pursuit of growth and development, that will support the degree of standardization, which will help a number of winners in this market, a number of brands. But equally, I don't feel it needs to be truly overly standardized. That could curtail, test and learning. That could curtail actual action of campaigns, and it could prevent some from doing it in the first place, which actually would be a detriment to the brands and the retailers and the customers if retail media gets to a place where it's quite sterilized, to be honest. So I'm one for a huge amount of creativity and relevancy, and equally, yes, we get to a form of standardization on the data, possibly.
Very right. Um, what specific data or attribution model is Snappy Shopper providing to FFCGs to sort of prove their ad spend on a quick commerce platform that actually drives the incremental sales?
Yeah, well, clearly we can see through each store, each customer, what's in their basket, so we can see what they're purchasing in real time, and that enables us then to create certain levels of measurement around uplift tracking. We can look at different time periods. We can look at share analysis. We can drill down into category analysis. So the data that we hold on each store and each customer, and the products that they purchase, we can provide the brands real clarity and inform them in ways which they don't necessarily have in this channel right now. It is a bit of a black hole in terms of data transparency. So yes, we shine a light through a digital lens, and that digital lens is circa 2,000 stores now. But actually, you're getting into many thousands orders a week and high volumes of GMV that actually then indicate this is the right thing that we're doing. Can we get confidence? I think is a key thing for me right now through the attribution of data. So any media ad that we serve in the app, any email that we serve, any social campaign we run, can we link that back to product sales? Can we link that back to share gains? But again, it just depends on the brand in terms of the metrics at which they require. I think majority would say, look, you need performance. We're going to spend X, did it deliver Y? Can we measure that in value terms, in volume terms? And obviously, what kind of is missing in between that is how much more units did we sell into that retailer? Yes, we've got the sales out with you, but there's some gaps within the process. So sales out perspective, we can see we sold this many more units when we ran this campaign, and there's different campaigns we can run, different levels of execution. You can see how many people see it. You can see how many people clicked on it. You can see how many people act upon it. And then we can see actually what are the sort of halos within that campaign. Because actually a lot of brands now in the UK, because of certain legislation, regulation, can't just advertise one product. They potentially can advertise a range of products. So actually, then you've got to decide, okay, through that ad, we've served 20 products. Well, which one did the customer buy? And what was the halo benefit of that? So we've got a number of things in our toolkit that we support brands on. And the great thing is that gives us a greater conversation around strategy, gives us a greater conversation about what's working, not working. A lot of brands, especially convenience, will look at single serve as the way to win through the physical shelf. But actually in the digital shelf, because it's a take-home mission in the main, you see bigger pack formulation. You see more intent, more purchase around multi-packs, sharing bags of crisps, sharing bags of chocolate. And that's something that's being adapted now in terms of that data is supporting some of the brand strategies around why they focus their core activities and activations with Snappy. At the same time, it can also influence how they start to work the physical shelf, because obviously it's being picked and packed from it. And actually their take-home customer could be up to 50% of that weekly sales in that store. So they're becoming strategically important, not only because of the volume and value that they generate, but also the retailer's intent around which products do I stock on the shelf to be picked and packed from, to a person that's perhaps never even frequent that store.
Interesting. I have a follow-up question. So, does the growth maturity curve of a brand matter? Like, is it easy for a new brand to enter quick commerce, or do they need to prove their presence of physical shelves and marketplaces to enter quick commerce? How does it work in the UK?
Anyone can enter. Snappy
Yeah.
Shopper, for example, we put the whole of the in-store online. We don't curtail range. We promote the fact that it's off-the-shelf pricing in the main. There's certain categories that do get inflated because of margin and profitability concerns. But overall, any brand can enter, whether you're a major player all the way through to an emerging product or category in its own right. The challenge really is about the expectations of each brand within that. And equally, the challenge for the retail media network is, how do I serve this brand or prioritize this product against another? So we're getting to that stage where actually we're having to think a lot more like a retailer in terms of trading, because actually the associated benefit of that ad is not just the revenue you obtain through charging a brand. Some call it a media tax. I'm not sure it is the case, but equally at the same time, I can serve content, and we've done this, and it didn't deliver a return. And the challenge then from the brand owner point of view is, well, that didn't work, so I'm not going to do it again. And perhaps curiosity is then ended in that moment. It's not particularly great for either side. So I think that the maturity curve, as you say, is, look, from a core brand categories as well, and you see a real focus on soft drinks, alcohol, confectionery, certain grocery items, biscuits, coffee, tea, milk, bread, eggs, etc. Always in the sort of top 20. Other categories to break into it, you're fighting against the grain a little bit, but you have to be seen. If you're not seen, it's harder to be sold. So we have various tactics and tools within our toolkit to support that. But I would encourage any brand, big or small, to get involved. The reality is, what we do differently is that actually we try and build a brand partnership with that brand. So we understand what their objectives are, what their dilemmas are, what's their pursuit of growth. And actually we're very candid and transparent whether we can achieve that for them. Again, trying to wrestle all these different requirements. And of course, we're not just serving content that serves us a benefit. We're trying to serve content that serves a consumer benefit, but also a retailer benefit. And that's so critically important for us that the retailers fundamentally will tell us if we're getting it right or wrong. They don't want to see us just taking some money for revenue for media that's not going to derive the customer benefit, which then doesn't drive them to sale. So they rather the effort and the focus be on things that they know that consumers want. The reality is, though, we have to, try to give some balance, which means we can bring in other brands that actually can stimulate and also can engage consumers a little bit differently. Whether that's through discount, whether that's through a free product sampling, or whether that's just through awareness. And I think that creates a lot of variety then in the platform that's good. Otherwise, a lot of media could just become wallpaper.
Right. That's very interesting because I asked this question particularly because quick commerce is booming in India. And what we see here is that when emerging brands list their products on quick commerce platforms, there's always this debate and this challenge that they face with unit economics. The brands that are quite established, that they're there on all platforms early since years, they do get a larger share, and these brands might get kicked off later on. So that's where this question was from.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because we're not the key decision maker of what gets stocked on the shelf.
Right.
So if you're an emerging brand in the UK, you've got to get listed by a wholesaler. You've got to find a route of supply to a store, and that store owner's got to be compelled to then stock you, not only for the benefit of digital commerce, but also for in-store, right? For the physical shopper walking in over the threshold of the store. And they've got a judgment call to make there. And of course, brands will try different initiatives and ways to encourage them. And there's a lot of emerging challenger brands in like the energy category, but the energy category is dominated by Red Bull. It's dominated by Monster Energy. It's dominated by Lucozade over here in the UK. So to enter into that, you've got to have something very compelling. You've got to have really great story to tell. And actually, I would say that most brands probably see e-commerce sometimes to their detriment as the channel which they can just accelerate performance. Yeah. But the reality is that consumer may be discovering you for the first time without really understanding what you are. Yeah. And that taste test is not there right now, right? So they've got to sample you, they've got to try you, and then we've got to try and drive that adoption. It's not a silver bullet. I think there's many ways strategically to try and win. But yeah, similar challenges, I would say, in the UK, to what you're seeing in India. It's a compelling quest in terms of, I think, for challenger brands to break in. But equally, the challenge is still there for core brands because there is a risk of inaction, complacency. Yeah. Actually, is this channel big enough for us to really influence or invest in right now versus physical? Is it grocery versus convenience, or is it other channels that we want to prioritize? So the reality is we're all trying to talk this up, but I think this really complements convenience or grocery retail because actually your strategy then can actually influence the in-store and the online. Go hand in hand. So I think it's rather compelling.
Definitely. When dealing with multi-site retail estates, corporate strategy often clashes with local store execution. So what is your playbook for launching national initiatives that actually achieve a higher GMV uplift at the individual local store level?
Ooh, that's a great question, because the reason it's such a great question is because we're probably the opposite here in the UK from a Snappy Shopper point of view. Firstly, if I was Deliveroo or I had my Uber Eats hat on, I maybe would be talking very differently. But from a Snappy point of view, independent single owner store operator is the backbone of our Q-commerce operation, right? And then we attach company-owned operators both regionally and nationally to it. But our playbooks are very different in that regard in terms of how we create the marketplace, how we operate the marketplace, and how we invest in that marketplace. And we've been doing it location by location. Scotland's our biggest because of where we've come from in terms of heritage. And actually now we start to migrate more so into England. We're doing it location by location and we're building it up. And when you then build great, fantastic independent retailers who have a great story to tell hyperlocally, have a conversation with that consumer at a very local level, where the big guys tend to not have that same experience. But they bring brand equity, they bring scale, they bring confidence and trust, and they do bring a different type of customer. But the executions do differ. I think for us, we have to play in both. Sometimes there is probably healthy tension in the marketplace, because actually we want everyone to thrive in the marketplace. We don't want to oversaturate the marketplace. We want good diversity, good stores, good operators, because we want everyone to be profitable in it.
Yeah.
And that's really key and important to us. So yeah, it's perhaps independent with multiple retailer on top. And as you're seeing right now, beyond a sort of aggregator approach of the big three plus Snappy, you're now seeing white label. So obviously you've got the emergence of Tesco with Whoosh, you've got Morrison's now with Morrison's. We've got, I think, 5 white label partners live with our technology right now in the UK that complements and runs alongside Snappy Shopper and the aggregators. So you've got big brand retailers now promoting their own proposition. You've got them obviously utilizing and maximizing the opportunity with the aggregators, including Snappy. And really now you're starting to move into that phase of, well, do I rent customers over here that drives product volume? At the same time, can I get them to adopt me as a retailer in this local area? And does that bring in another type of customer that's much more loyal and trustworthy of that retailer's brand versus adopting a third-party platform? So that's another thing that's new, that's a really interesting proposition. And I think in the next few years, you'll start to see that grow quite significantly, running alongside the aggregators that will continue to grow plus 10% each year, no problem.
Great. How should brands shift their performance marketing strategy when looking at quick commerce platforms compared to traditional brick and mortar or standard e-commerce setups?
Yeah. I could sit here and say, yes, you need to spend more money with me. That would be a good bet. But I think it's really interesting. I think what I'm seeing is a shift towards having dedicated Q-commerce teams. I feel that's kind of right in this moment to support the learning, to support the journey. And that investment is in people, firstly, of course. And those people, maybe curious around digital or have experience or skills in digital, and they're trying to transpose those skills then into an environment across a number of players. And I think we're in that sort of learning phase still, really, with retail media through e-commerce. And the digital shelves differ and the executions differ. And I think the investment plays clearly differ depending on partner. I think where I see it moving to for brands, and I think this is where the investment then comes in, is I don't necessarily see it as a different distinct silos. I do see, if you're responsible for convenience retail, both B2B wholesale all the way through to B2C, then you should probably have one budget. And that one budget then is executed based on the different operators that operate within that. And you're trying to drive the outcomes in which your business desires. Does Q-commerce play a greater role in that moving forward? Quite possibly because of the shift of consumer habits. The reasoning to use these platforms is greater than ever before because of, you want a plethora of choice of different fascia and different retail type, and equally you want the convenience that comes with it, or you enjoy the experience that one offers, or you enjoy the value and discounts and subscription that they provide. It can't be ignored by the brands and it can't be ignored by the retailer. So I do think, being a bit of a politician, I do think that the shift will happen, but I think there's a human shift in structure and architectural design. And then I think there's an investment shift. I think we're still in that discovery stage right now in the UK, but it's moving very, very quickly. It's rapid, actually, to be honest. So we're having to up our game. We're having to evolve and adapt to that as much as the brands are. So I have huge empathy for the brands in that regard, because the demands are there, probably from internal stakeholders and platforms and operators like us, that saying, actually, you should do this with the right intentions. But some are not ready, or some are very focused where they're playing. And of course, I've not even mentioned the likes of Amazon, people like that, right? And even potentially Joe moving forward. So there's different competitors, there's different ways in terms of digital commerce you can influence your brand sales. So it's difficult for brands to prioritize. But I do see that shift. So human level, structure, organizational design, all the way through to then investment. And that will continue to grow as the relevancy and the growth of these platforms increase. Likewise, it would be a bit of a myth if a brand sort of says, actually, I'm just going to ignore this. It's almost ignore it at your peril, to be honest.
So true. What is the primary consumer behavior that's driving quick commerce? Like here in India, we see it's more of convenience. I mean, definitely convenience paired with the kind of price value that consumers get. Uh, that's what's driving quick commerce here. What is that, the primary thing that's driving that?
Well, I think you're dead right in terms of there's going to be similarities, I think, across the globe. I think, people's expectations are differ now versus before, and perhaps accelerated and adopted through something like the pandemic, which probably accelerated everything by a number of years. And I do think, our expectations of digital or shopping now is a lot of it is primarily going to be more forward through the phone. So I think there's a consumer expectation that's driving this. I think there is the convenience that always will be. That there's actually, how do I get something really quick? I'm a busy mum. I've got 2 children. I'm at home. It's wet. I don't want to leave the house. Actually, I can get what I need delivered to me in 30 minutes. Like, it's perhaps even quicker in places like India, right? It's pretty incredible. And that, as long as it's then provided in a way that's providing a great customer experience, it becomes habitual. And you see that, and we see the frequency, and we can see the retention of customer, the adoption of customer is there. I think it will only grow from that point of view. I do think it's less about speed. I think it's around quality and service and experience that you have on that platform. Even experience, it can always go all the way through to the doorstep in terms of that delivery. However, I think,
And I guess even
sorry.
planned shopping is on the rise, right? Like we all are more planned than ever before.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I can't speak for India, but I think in the UK, the rising cost of living, people are managing budgets very differently now. And actually, if you're doing something digitally and people are creatures of habit, they'll tend to add the same items quite frequently, in all honesty. But actually, they can manage a budget very differently that way, perhaps. Even though they maybe are paying a delivery fee, even though there's promotions and offers that you don't have to. So yeah, I think there's probably a financial aspect to it. There's lots of investment in deals and promotions that obviously are exciting for shoppers to shop. Some platforms offer rewards and subscriptions, so there's more value to be had perhaps using these platforms. But I think it comes down to what is the need of that consumer in that moment, what mission are they on, and the convenience of it. And equally, I think there's also an element of localism. I do feel that some people prefer to shop from their local shop. They like to support their local store. And no disrespect to Amazon stuff, but sometimes perhaps that's not the case. So actually, I think as we think global, but then rethink local as human beings, especially in the UK, I think, when that retailer's showing up on a Facebook feed, you follow them and they're talking about the latest products that are now listed in their store, and they're saying we'll get it delivered to you in 30 minutes. You're probably more compelled to do that, probably more compelled to support them. So there's so many contributing factors, which is really fantastic. And that only bodes well, I think, for adoption and growth. I think that also creates wonderful opportunities for brands to get involved as well.
Definitely. I have 2 more questions for you. One is around as privacy regulations tighten and third-party cookies disappear, how are you at Snappy Shopper leveraging first-party transaction data offsite to bring customers back into the closed-loop ecosystem of the platform?
Yes, very, very interesting. To date, we've been doing very little with that in our sort of growing up stage. There are things that we brought to market where we actually power a number of retailers' social media for them, which then means that we can actually put content into those spaces that are heavily adopted by local people in terms of following them, that brings them back to the platform, right? That's one form of way we're doing it, a little bit different to other people. But again, that sort of localism, that hyperlocal impact, that ability to communicate more with agility and speed is there, and that supports us. We're obviously looking at ways in which we can leverage that with brands, and actually how do we partner with brands and leverage that with brands that they can use that to bring consumers back to us and to them, because we don't have the same budgets as some of the big players over here, so we have to think a little bit differently. But for sure, I think first party data in that regard, how do you use that to drive more people back to you? How do you use that to drive a different experience on the platform? So I think people's expectations now are far greater around, I want you to identify me as me and offer things that are relevant to me. Right. So we need to do more with that in terms of personalization. See certain e-commerce platforms and stuff starting to develop that to aggregate it. And I think it's really, really interesting. And I do feel, again, it's one of the most expected things as consumers. You've got data on me, you know me, continue to serve things that I'm interested in.
Definitely.
So that's stuff that we've got to move to. I think over the next 12 to 18 months, we'll start to move to that. And we'll start to do much more relevant personalized comms to consumers that use the Snappy platform and shop from the store of their choice. And actually is getting that down to a store and level as well. We're already starting to do that, execute at a very hyperlocal level from a store to consumer or a group to consumer, rather than just being broadcast platform as well. And those little moments where we can do that, we see greater conversion to spend in the platform off the back of that. And I think the consumers have a much greater experience as a result. So that's really interesting. Potentially the use of AI can accelerate that, of course, as well.
Definitely. How do you think commercial leaders, for brands, how do you think they can actually evolve the experience to make it more hyper personalized?
Well, I think that's a really difficult one to execute as a national brand. I think because actually, I think for a lot of brands, when you start getting to hyper-personalization, does that move the needle on the metrics that you're looking for? There's a bit of a compromise there. People want to ensure that their investments are not wasted, but at the same time, they want scale and reach. I don't know at what point that will change, truthfully, because I think there's an expectation internally in those businesses from perhaps the CFO or leaders that all this we need to deliver more. But from a quality aspect, I can only talk more recently. What we've been doing actually is, and actually a campaign that's coming up next week for us is that we're working with a challenger brand that's just got listed actually in a retail group of circa 40, 50 stores. And they're working with us to actually offer non-alcoholic drinkers a free can of their non-alcoholic beer. And we're going to use that sort of localism around exclusively to this retail group, exclusively to you as consumers. And we're going to use all our different touch points to execute that campaign to try and drive brand impact very local level. Even though we still have advertising and national campaigns running the platform, we're bringing it all the way down to that specific group, executing that specific group alongside the major campaigns. So I think we can be as big or as small as we like. I suppose it does depend on what impact we're trying to achieve. And equally, how operationally efficient and effective is it? And how is it easy for us to implement that? Now, luckily, it's all our own tech, so we can make conscious decisions about the support of third-party tech from an ad tech perspective. But again, that's just an example of something that we're doing at a very hyper-local level. I think a lot of brands will still work at a national level, but equally, they may work on the regions as well. Sometimes brands may want to execute a little bit differently in Scotland versus Wales versus England, because we have got all the nations here under the umbrella of Snappy Shopper. And we start to see that a little bit coming through. certainly through some of the brand budgets as well, how they dice that up, shall we say, divide it up, and how they then choose to execute it can look a little bit differently. But again, we're a platform that can take that. We can execute against that, and equally, it all sort of ladders up to the overall objective of that brand. So, are we moving market share? Are we moving unit economics? Are we driving more awareness? Depending on what references are, of course. But yeah, we're doing it already, and we're trying to find ways to make that easier for brands to execute against that with us. At the same time, still drive high impact, high intent, high performance. It's tricky to forecast depending on the partner
Yeah.
we're working.
Definitely. Very interesting conversation, Greg. I'm sure our audience are going to love it. Thank you so much for taking out the time to join me on the show. Yeah, everyone should tune in to listen to us.
Thank you very much. Pleasure. Thank you.